Hey there, we're live. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Brita. I'm a student advisor here at the Firehose project, and this is Ken, our co-founder and CTO. We're super excited to be chatting with you today, so thank you everybody for joining us. And we will launch in pretty soon, just a minute, to the topic of the day. So this is a question that we get a lot, and it is the question of web developers versus software engineers, and what is the difference there? And so we're going to kind of launch into that and talk a little bit about both. And then we're going to go in and kind of talk a little bit more about our program, what we prepare you for, and how we do that. So stay tuned to learn a little bit more. We'll give you kind of a sneak peek of what our full course platform looks like, as well as our job preparation tracks, and talk about the curriculum and kind of our teaching style as well. So if you have any questions, definitely enter them on the side in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get back to you with an answer. And you can also send in questions at any time to questions@thefirehoseproject.com, and we'll get back to you quickly and chat further, answer your questions, and make sure you're all set. So let's dive right in, I guess. So the question of the day: what is the difference between a web developer and a software engineer?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty common question that people have, is what's the difference between these two terms? And at the end of the day, there's really not much of a difference between the two terms at all. You really should focus on just becoming a computer programmer and somebody who's able to solve problems with computers, as opposed to worrying about either of those titles. Because realistically, if you're a web developer, you're probably a software engineer, and if you're a software engineer, you're probably a web developer. So I wouldn't put too much stock into the actual title, and instead I would just focus on learning the fundamentals and becoming a good computer programmer in general.
Got it. So if, just for the sake of everybody watching, if we're going to get kind of nitty-gritty and technical, like what are the kind of supposed differences between that? Or what does a web developer kind of focus on exclusively, or a software engineer? And then obviously we'll see kind of how they overlap. But what if we're going to get like technical in the definition there, what does that look like?
Absolutely. So a software engineer is a little bit more of a generic term. So a software engineer can be building things on desktop apps, mobile apps, web applications, or any type. So it's sort of this blanket term that sort of applies to any type of a programmer, and a web developer is kind of this slightly narrower type of a developer, which only focuses specifically on web development. And what is web development? Web development is writing computer applications that can be executed within a web browser. So it's sort of narrowing you down, so you're not writing desktop apps, you're not writing mobile apps, and you're not doing any of these things. But a web developer is, by the nature of sort of what it is, a software engineer as well. So the terms kind of have some overlap, but at the same time, they are a little bit different. But I tend to tell people to focus on becoming just the best programmer they can be.
Cool. Yeah. And so we'll dive a little bit more into that, and kind of how you can prepare yourself to be a versatile and in-demand programmer. And also how, so our course trains you to be a full stack web developer. But how you can take those skills and really apply that foundation, and like being just a solid programmer to, more software engineer, other things. Like we've had students that have gone off and become iOS developers. So that's a great example as well. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So what are kind of the skills needed to be an in-demand programmer when you're, applying for jobs and developing your career as a programmer?
Yeah, it's a super good question, and it's something that everybody should focus on. I think the biggest thing that is important when you're trying to break into the software engineering or web development career is the ability to break down big problems into smaller problems, and then be able to use computers to solve them. So basically, the term that we use to talk about sort of this idea of taking an abstract problem and solving it is writing algorithms. So focusing on how to just do these types of data transformations, write these algorithms, solve these problems, that's what makes you really in demand, is being able to do that type of stuff.
Cool. And so we actually held an info session on this a little while ago, But if we could get maybe like a 1 or 2 sentence overview of what is an algorithm, that might be helpful. I know a bunch of these students that are joining us today are in our prep course and maybe haven't dealt with algorithms yet and learned that. So we could just get kind of like a brief overview of what an algorithm actually is and why that's important.
Yeah, so I think one of the best ways to talk about algorithms is to just talk about a concrete, specific example of one. So one of the best potentially find somebody's name in a phone book. So if you like rewind the clock and you think back a long time ago when you would actually look people up in the phone book is organized alphabetically, so usually by last name. And if you were looking for just kind of like thumb your way through and actually find it. But the most efficient way to find somebody's name in a phone book is to take the phone book and cut it in half and determine which half is it on, and then continue to do that sort of halving to sort of like split it down the middle and find which half is it on and sort of do that. So the process of taking sort of a abstract problem like finding a name in a phone book, rather than sort of doing it manually where you sort of look through every single name and look for the match. Instead, if you do something a little bit different, like cutting it in half and sort of making your problem set a lot smaller, things like that is an algorithm. So any sort of like process that you sort of have, that you sort of do, is an algorithm, and then you can use computer programs to actually execute the algorithm that you have. But the algorithm, the actual definition of it is just the process of doing something and sort of defining it in a very clear, defined way, as opposed to doing it sort of like abstractly, like just find the name in the phone book, as opposed to exactly how do you find the name in the phone book. So that's what algorithms are all about.
Cool. Yeah, and I know that like something we talk a lot about with students and in our program is how algorithms are basically, you know, computers think, if you will, very differently than humans, and they need everything to be broken down and unambiguous. And so algorithms are basically a way to make a very clear set of instructions for every like use case for this thing that you want to do, and then being able to implement that through your program. Awesome. So definitely in terms of being an in-demand programmer and, you know, landing a job as a web developer or other types of software engineering, working with algorithms and just having that ability to, you know, work with computer science fundamentals and stuff like that. On a personal level, like what do you think makes a good kind of candidate for those types of roles, or a good programmer that allows someone to be an in-demand programmer? Like what kind of qualities or traits?
Yeah, I think one of the best traits you can have is just having the ability to learn new things on the fly. I think there is always going to be changing in the marketplace and sort of like new technologies and new ideas and new things coming up, but the ability to learn new things as you are going and as you build programs and being able to adapt is one of the best things that you can have for almost any role that you have, but particularly as a software engineer or web developer. So just the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, and the ability to do research and understand things on your own, outside of sort of the structure of building out the application that you're working on.
Cool. Another thing we talk about a lot that seems maybe really basic or simple is just like attention to detail and being able to kind of like follow directions and documentation and stuff like that. So maybe if you could just speak for a minute about like why that's so important and how that comes into play in day-to-day life as a programmer.
Yeah, I think attention to detail is one of those things that is really apparent as you're sort of becoming a web developer, building out your first applications and things like that, that it becomes very important. Things like typos, like having one letter off can potentially cause your web application to throw error messages and do things that you don't want it to happen. Things like the difference between a capital and a lowercase letter, that can make your program either work or not. So it's all these small details. There's a lot of symbols that sort of you end up typing, and getting all of them perfect is something that you need to do if your program is going to actually execute properly. So it's learning all of the small details that might not seem all that important, but actually are in the grand scheme of things, and having that attention to detail, noticing problems, noticing differences between one version and another, and things like that. So as a programmer, having a really solid attention to detail is something that will get you a long way. So the quicker you learn how to notice these small, seemingly unimportant things that actually are kind of a big deal, the sooner you won't have to deal with certain categories of problems with your web application. So it's super important to be able to sort of narrow in and sort of notice these small details.
Cool, yeah, and I know that having a good attention to detail and just being observant and noticing all these things, like you said, also really helps our students and programmers pick up on patterns. And so could you maybe talk a little bit, like that's something that we've talked about a bit, how patterns are so important and why being able to like follow patterns and pick up on patterns and how that helps you as a developer as you're learning and then also just working in a development role?
Yeah, I think noticing and recognizing patterns as well as following them and sort of using them is a really useful skill as a programmer for a variety of reasons. One, it shows you the way to solve general categories of problems as opposed to do a certain task. So if you know how to do a certain category of problem, to solve a certain category of problems, you can potentially solve a lot of different problems by following the same pattern. So recognizing a single pattern and being able to apply it in different situations is really important, as well as the fact that a lot of things can be done in similar ways. So by being able to recognize these patterns, you can potentially take something from one category and sort of like pull it into another. So a lot of problems can be solved if you just open your mind up and try to think about how have you solved similar problems in the past, and just ask yourself, is there a pattern that you could potentially follow? And it also makes it so you don't have to potentially think about things so much, because if you just know how to apply something, you don't necessarily have to ask yourself questions. In Ruby on Rails, so that's what we teach in our bootcamp, there's the idea of convention over configuration. So rather than thinking about what you're going to always name your variables and how you're going to do X and how you're going to do Y, there's just kind of like a set of principles that they say this is the way to go about it. And at first it can be a little bit confusing to sort of learn the patterns that you end up having to follow, but over time it makes it really helpful, because you no longer have to ask yourself, how am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And you just can follow the pattern that you've set forth. So Ruby on Rails, the convention over configuration, makes it really easy to build web applications really quickly because of ideas like these. So following patterns is pretty important.
Cool. So I think like the takeaways from this then are that, it's better to kind of have this solid foundation. There's not a huge difference between web developers and software engineers. They kind of fit together and within each other. And so like having a solid foundation in computer science fundamentals, especially writing algorithms, and that's why we focus so much on that in our program, is getting the practice writing algorithms and using those and really getting that hands-on experience. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And that's definitely a pretty hard thing to teach, because it requires a lot of time and focus and, like Ken was mentioning, noticing patterns, which just takes time to, be involved in the curriculum and be working on it and really learning by doing it and by writing code. So writing algorithms and ability to pick up on patterns, being detail-oriented, all of that. Is there anything else you would add? I guess learning new things and really just testing things out as well.
Yeah, I think the last thing I might want to touch on is the idea that once you actually start to learn some of this stuff, it really is all about like data transformation and how you can change one thing into another thing. And the whole process of thinking about how you can use computers to do that is just the most important thing. So it's just kind of getting the grasp of sort of the idea of how do you do these transformations, and then how do you use computers to solve the problem. But that's the most important part of becoming a software engineer or a web developer or any of these terms. It's just learning how to use computers and use them effectively. So I think that's the last thing that I'd like to touch on.
Cool, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ken. I know it's a question we get a lot, so it's awesome to chat about it a little bit further. Definitely, if you have any questions, put them in the chat bar on the side, and we'll be answering those. Or like I said, you can always send them in to questions@thefirehoseproject.com. And so with that, we'll kind of launch into our program and how we teach full stack web development, and what that means and why we focus a lot on algorithms and a computer science foundation, and how you can take that on within your career as a developer. So to start off, we'll kind of talk about why coding is relevant and important, and why that might be, a career that is worth or interested to get into. So coding right now and programming there's this saying that it's, software is eating the world. And so taking a look at that saying and kind of what that means, we're finding more and more, like if you look at technology over the past 5 or 10 years and the advancements that we've had, and then try to look ahead to 5 or 10 years, programming is being involved in every industry at every level. So we're seeing, these crazy kind of technologies, like we've got SpaceX and autonomous cars and all of these things. And there's software that's, being written into cars now. So that's something that we've never had before. And so programming is involved in the automotive industry. It's involved in all of these kind of exploration and really like high-tech industries. But it's also involved in a lot of the kind of older, more traditional industries as well. So we've got, every company now is looking to have, has a website, has a web app where you can log in. We're seeing more subscription-based, economy. So whether it's dealing with, your insurance or dealing with, I don't know, all these kinds of random subscriptions. My sister just got a toothbrush subscription and she manages that online, and that's a web app that builds that out. So now there's, programmers working at a toothbrush company. So that's a weird example, but you can start to think about how this is being involved in so many different industries, and why it's such an in-demand career. And so the demand for this is just increasing over time, as we're seeing more and more industries catching up and kind of latching on to, whether it's a subscription model economy or looking to automate processes through algorithms that previously required, a lot more manpower and that are becoming inefficient. So basically, the job demand for these roles is just increasing exponentially, and there are not enough people that can do these roles. So that's why coding boot camps are becoming more and more popular, because it's a great way to get a really intensive education with hands-on experience, if you choose a good coding boot camp that provides that for you. So that's kind of looking at like the job demand and industry side, and then looking at, obviously, any students or anybody here that's joining us today is probably considering an option as a career for themselves, looking at a personal level, what is it kind of like to work in these jobs? And what students that have graduated from our program and landed developer roles are telling us is that it's this new type of job that they didn't have before, where it's challenging every day and they're learning, and it's something new every day, and they're building a product that people are actually using and is used in the wild, that they can see their direct contributions to that. So in that sense, it's a very creative role actually, and that you're creating some product that people are using. And the coding as a career involves a lot of problem solving and puzzles and critical thinking. And so in that sense, it's a really kind of stimulating and fulfilling role, in the sense that, you're challenging yourself every day at work and, working on new projects every day and looking at how to take a problem or an opportunity and address that with code by having a computer, like Ken was saying, take information and turn it into something else, and basically just use computers effectively. So that being said, talking about the job demand and the lack of, workforce for that demand right now, coding boot camps, like I said, are becoming a really popular way and more common way to train up for those roles. So talking about our coding boot camp and kind of how we got started and our teaching style and all of that. So we got started several years ago actually teaching in-person courses. So we started off by teaching intensive boot camps to students at places like Harvard, Babson, RISD, Carnegie Mellon, Brown. And what that helped us do was get a really solid understanding and feedback loop of how students learn the best. So many of you have signed up for our prep course already. And so we heard a lot of feedback that it actually sounds like someone's talking to you and it's personable and things are easy to understand. And a lot of that we're able to develop because of teaching in person and having that experience face-to-face with students. But we quickly realized that there's a lot of benefits to teaching online and having an online coding bootcamp. And so we moved our program to an online course for a number of reasons. One is that the kind of old school lecture type teaching is a less individualized way of learning. So you have one instructor in a classroom full of students, and as you're learning, you're kind of held at the pace of the students around you, and you're kind of vying for that instructor's attention when you need help or if you have questions. And so you get a lot less of an individualized experience. So by moving the program to an online course, what we're able to do is provide the right content at the right time for your learning. So if you need a little bit more time to go over one concept, you can review that and not worry about being left behind by the class. Or if you're doing really well, you can continue going and not worry about being bored because the class is behind where you are. And then we also build in a lot of support so that you always get help when you need it. And so that's something we'll touch on shortly. But rather than needing to get the attention of the instructor who's teaching a whole class, we have a lot of supports that you always get quick answers from Firehose engineers or ambassadors. You get a lot of feedback and personal attention and review of your code. So that's a really important part of the program as well. Another reason why we moved to an online program is so that we can scale it out and have a really strong Firehose community of students all over the world, mentors all over the world. And that's a huge part of what makes our program so great, is that we have this diverse community of students and mentors all bringing different insights and backgrounds and perspectives into our program. And so that's a great opportunity to learn from others and network and just see other perspectives as well. So once you join the full program, the curriculum, which we'll talk about shortly, it's the same type of structure as our online, our free prep course. So for those of you who are in the free prep course and going through some lessons, it's going to be very similar to that. But in the full program, you're going to be really launched into this Firehose community of peers and the Firehose team and mentors and kind of experts that are going to be helping you all along the way. So taking a look at kind of what that looks like and what type of support you'll be getting in the program. So first of all, as you're coding along in the lessons, we never want you to feel like you're stuck or isolated or coding alone. And it can be really frustrating when you're starting off if you have an error message and you can't figure it out and you're spending a lot of time on it and it turns out it was because of a typo or something like that. And that's a situation that is a good learning situation, but we don't want you to get stuck spinning your wheels. So what we do is we have a forum at the bottom of each lesson, and that's a way that you can get really quick help from a Firehose engineer or ambassador to answer any of your technical questions. And so it's a great medium for that because you're able to copy and paste in your code or enter a screenshot, and we'll get you help really quickly and make sure that you're able to continue working through lessons and continue learning. And so that's something that you can actually test out or use in the free bootcamp prep course. So you'll notice the forum at the bottom of each lesson. And if you get stuck on any of those lessons or have a question kind of about the technical coding aspect, you can post in there and we'll help you out right away. So that's a great time to kind of test that out and get a sense for our support there. And then we have weekly office hours with Ken, who is just here, and with Marco. And so that's a time that you can call into some virtual office hours and ask your questions, hear other students' questions, and just have a time to chat about kind of your experience, what maybe was challenging that week, and get some support and help and just chat with our Firehose community and our co-founders, Ken and Marco. So that's a really awesome opportunity. We always record that and send it out to students. Students find that really helpful. And then we also are going to be giving you regular code reviews. And so this is a super important part of learning how to program and really ramping up your skills, is having code reviews from an engineer and from an expert, where you basically get the chance to go over your code and look at how you can improve it, how you can refactor it, make it more efficient, other methods that you could be using. And that's a really solid learning opportunity. So you're getting that every time that you're building out a project and working on challenges from our Firehose team. And then you're also having those opportunities with your mentor as well. So every student in our full program gets matched with a mentor. And our mentors are all full-time programmers that have years of experience. Many of them are senior developers at various companies. And so you're going to have regular mentor meetings with the same mentor that you'll be working with throughout the whole program. So you get to develop a great mentor-mentee relationship and kind of network in that sense as well. And then those mentor sessions are really what kind of help you on a high level take your coding skills to the next level each week. So as you're meeting with your mentor, you can talk about things that were challenging, things that were confusing. You can work through challenges that you have with your code in the program. And it's also an awesome opportunity to pair program. And so if you're not sure what pair programming is, it's basically coding alongside together, usually using some type of screen share technology, and going through the process together. And in this sense, really kind of learning from an expert, but while also having that hands-on experience. So rather than just watching somebody do it or doing it yourself and kind of asking questions, you get to do it together and really pick up on techniques that they're using, the way that they're thinking. It's an awesome opportunity to talk through what you're thinking as you're coding and then hear what they would be thinking as they're talking through and share all of that feedback. So that's something that also you do in your first dev role. So usually when you start on a team, you're going to start off with some really small tasks, maybe fixing bugs, working with the code source, and then as you ramp up, you'll start pair programming with usually more senior developers as they're kind of ramping you up and getting you onto the next level of working on projects on that team. So it's also a great way to prepare for your first role and knowing what pair programming is like and getting to benefit from that opportunity as well. So in addition to that, we have our Firehose Slack channel, our community page, we have Google Groups. So you're always able to interact with our Firehose community of students, ambassadors, alumni, mentors. And so you can chat with people from all over the world that are going through the same experience. We have a cool feature that I'll show you where you can actually see who's coding on the same lessons as you and the same projects. And you can find them in Slack. So if you have questions, if you're stuck on something, if you just want to say, hey, we give you those opportunities to really meet and network with all of your peers in the program. And then lastly, on the subject of support, you'll have a team project where you will work with a team, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you'll be working and meeting with a team of other students and working through a more complex app project. And that's a really awesome time to get more support and feedback about your code as well. So let's dive more into the curriculum. And so before I start, I won't go too much into detail because you are able to preview the full program and all of the projects and curriculum that you'll be working on from the free Bootcamp prep course. So if you're signed into your account in the Bootcamp prep course, you can see in the top right, I believe, a preview full program link. And that's going to actually show you all the projects that you'll work on, the curriculum, the technology that you'll use, as well as our job prep lessons in much more detail. So our curriculum kind of on a higher level, we start all of our students out with the free Bootcamp prep course. So most of you are signed up and going through that right now, hopefully having fun, learning some Ruby code, creating a portfolio. So what we do there is we teach HTML and CSS, and you'll actually create a splash page for your portfolio within the first hour and be able to share that, and then we'll add to that later. And then you'll dive right in and start writing Ruby programs. And you'll be getting code reviews on some code challenges that we'll be giving you. So as we're teaching you these lessons, we'll then say, here's a challenge, tie these concepts together and do X. And then you'll actually submit that, and a Firehose engineer or ambassador will review that and get back to you and give you any tips on how you can improve your code and make that better. And so you'll be getting that feedback right off the bat and learning what it's like to get some code reviews and improving your skills there. And once you go through all of the challenges and get the thumbs up on those, we can actually officially accept you into our full program. And then we start students every Monday in our full program, so you can choose any week that works for you. And then once your start date is there, you'll launch right into it. And so you start pretty quickly building out your first app that you'll host online in the full program. And this first app is actually a database-powered quotes generator. So you'll be working with concepts like building a database and designing that and how that works, how you can enter items or data into the database, and then also designing a module where you can have user input and store that and then generate it back. And then you're also going to be working on the front end design as well. So you start teaching this full stack development from the very beginning. And within the first week or so, you'll be building out and hosting your first app online. And so you're going to be using Git and GitHub, working with Heroku, and going through that whole process from wireframing to hosting the app online. And so that's how kind of our teaching style works. It's a very hands-on, the best way to learn coding is by coding and just by doing it every day or as often as you can. So our program is very much oriented around project-based hands-on curriculum. So you're going to be building out 5 apps throughout our program, and each one is going to be, increased complexity and working with different features as well. So whether it's so you'll be working with things like Google Maps API and location-based user input, image uploading, working with how to have user login and authentication. So if you start thinking about these types of features, they're ones that you use every day as a user. So for example, using Yelp or Airbnb. Both of those are web apps that a full stack web developer designs or a full stack web development team designs. And so both of those use features like user login and authentication. So that's the process of matching the password, making sure it's correct, all of that, and then having a user account. And then working with databases to have uploaded images stored, to have commenting, rating systems, like a star rating system on Yelp or Airbnb. And so these are all the types of features that we're teaching you how to build out. So the next app that you'll build out actually is a Yelp clone, and you'll go through the whole process from end to end of building that out and what that looks like. So as you're building out these projects, we're going to be giving you other types of things to work on, so like coding challenges, which take everything that you're learning and ask you to really apply that kind of on your own without following a lesson. And that's where we go from kind of teaching you and walking you through these steps and how to do the things to saying, okay, now you do it. And that's a really crucial point, is working through those challenges and really applying that on your own. And it's very challenging, but then getting that kind of empowering feeling that you can do it, and you can, work through all the lessons that you've previously done and apply that knowledge. So we have various things like challenges, we have some quizzes that you'll be doing throughout the program, and then the program kind of culminates in 8 weeks of working on a team project, where you actually are going to get matched with a team of other Firehose students and work with a team lead who's a Firehose mentor. And you're going to be building out a much more complex app that uses a lot of logic and algorithms. And a lot of what you get out of this project and what really helps our students get jobs after the program is the ability to go through that agile workflow as a team. So what that means is taking a large project, a large objective, breaking it down, looking at all of the things that need to be done in order to achieve that objective, and then working as a team to divide those up, to plan a schedule, a sprint schedule, having weekly meetings or regular meetings where you talk about what you've been working on, what's blocking you, what you'll be doing next, and then coordinating how to basically write your code as an individual member of a team and share that and have that all come together into a larger project. So this allows you to not only get that experience of working on a team, but then when you go to a technical interview and you're talking about your projects that you've worked on, you can speak to that team experience, and it shows the hiring manager that if they were to hire you, they'd be able to, drop you into their team and you'd hit the ground running, and you have a basis of communication and how dev teams work. Because all the best products are definitely designed by teams. And that's a huge part of getting a dev role, is not only having the technical ability, but being able to work on a team and work effectively. So the project, the Firehose project, ends in an 8-week team project where you'll build out this complex app. And so at this point, let's take a look quickly at what our platform looks like. And we'll go over some of the job preparation as well and some of those lessons, and give you a little sneak peek preview of that. All right, so we'll get this a bit bigger so everybody can see. So this is what a student dashboard looks like. For those of you who are in the Bootcamp prep course, you'll notice that it looks a bit similar, where you have these tracks, but there's a couple new things too. So up here, we've got some additional topics, so the job prep and then our advanced courses. And you're going to see your weekly goals up here as well as your progress bar. So our course is online, and it's self-paced in the sense that you can put in the hours of coding when it makes sense for you and your schedule and your time zone, which means that we have students that have full-time jobs, part-time jobs, family obligations, travel, all of that, that are able to go through our program. That being said, the 22-week advanced paced course does require about 25 to 35 hours per week of coding, and the 42-week program requires about 12 to 15 hours per week. So you'll see that we have, goals that help you kind of stay on track, and you can check these off and see what's coming up next. And so we really give you these tools to help hold yourself accountable as you're going through the lessons. And so these are some of the different lesson tracks and projects that you'll be working on. And you'll be able to see these, like I said, in the preview full program, and you can read more about these in detail, as well as our job prep lessons. So I won't get too much into that now, but I want to kind of give you a preview of what some of the actual lessons look like. So if we go over here, this is a lesson as you're building out what's called the Knobster app. And so this is the Yelp clone that I was referring to. And so as you can see over here, these are kind of all the lessons that and features that you'll be working on. So you've got things like the home page. This is going to be adding some front-end design, user authentication, adding a Google Map. So this is where you'll be working with a Google Map API. And then I just drilled down into a lesson about adding commenting and rating. So if you think about Yelp, where you have, restaurants or whatever, and then you can add comments and you can rate the restaurant. So you can give it, 1 to 5 stars. So this is basically building out the rating system as a drop down. So we know that we only want to give people the option of entering 1 to 5 stars. And so you'll see you're working through the logic of how you can build this out. So the lessons are text-based mostly. And the reason why we do that is that as a developer, you're going to be working with written documentation as you're working on new projects and as you're working on, with new APIs and stuff like that. So it's really good to get into the practice of reading through written documentation and working based off of that. Also, students do have lifetime access to the current curriculum. So you're able to go back to these lessons and really use them as a great resource after graduation at any time. And text-based lessons are really great for that. You'll also see this is where I was referring to where you can find students that are in the program on the same project as you in Slack, and you can chat with them once you're invited into our Slack channel. And then you'll see down here the forum at the bottom of the lesson. And this is where you can ask questions and get help from Firehose engineers and ambassadors. And so you'll see a bunch of students already have questions up here. Sometimes you can find good answers. You can search. A lot of times students have some of the same questions, so you can see if you can answer your own question first, and we're always there to help if not. And so you'll also see we do have, these are some of the challenges that I was referring to. So you're going to have various challenges where you're really asked to apply the concepts that you've been learning in the program. And so we'll give you some of these. We'll take a look at what one of these looks like. So these are, different challenges where we'll basically ask you to put these concepts into practice and build something out, and then you'll be submitting that, getting code review. And so that's a big part of really that learning process, is taking it from us kind of showing you how to do things and doing it yourself. And that's a huge part of, what helps you feel confident doing that after the program. And throughout the course, we'll also have video overviews. And so these are basically ways that we do recognize that it is helpful to kind of have someone talking through some of the really big concepts. So for things like object-oriented programming, we have all of these videos that we're able to provide at the right time in the curriculum and go through and have you, watch an overview on, for example, initializing a class. So we do have a combination of curriculum where we have text-based as well as all these video overviews. And we're able to basically say, at a certain point, once you've completed certain lessons, now is a great time to go watch, video 3 in the object-oriented programming videos. It's going to kind of explain everything that we just discussed and help you tie it together and use that moving forward. So we do have this kind of combination curriculum as well. So the other portion that we didn't discuss yet is our job preparation. So we have extensive job preparation lessons that we actually built out with a lot of feedback from hiring managers and recruiters. And we have 50 plus lessons in job preparation. And again, you can go through all of these and see, these details in the preview the full program link in the free bootcamp prep course. And so you'll see that we have, a lot of lessons starting all the way from the beginning of job search, what to expect, optimizing your application, and reverse engineering the technical interview. So we can click into these and start seeing what some of these lessons look like and really how detailed and kind of action-oriented they are. So we'll start kind of talking through the process, and then we're going into, all of these things about, crafting the perfect resume. So we actually talked about how to create that resume. Again, we got a lot of feedback from technical recruiters on this, and so we're able to implement all of that in these lessons. So going through kind of all of these things, and we're giving you real actionable tasks that you can follow along with and go through the job application process. And again, you have lifetime access to this current curriculum. So you're able to refer back to this at any time, whether it's, applying for your first job after graduation or your second job, and just really use this as an awesome resource. And so the final thing that we can show here are our advanced programming courses. And these are designed to be basically like a Firehose graduate program. So once you have gone through the full program and are either searching for jobs and want to become a more competitive candidate, or in your first role and want to keep learning, that was something that Ken referred to earlier in the info session, is that the ability to keep learning, keep trying out new technologies is something that really makes a great programmer. And so we want to set you up for success with that, and have been creating a lot of curriculum of new in-demand technologies. So working with React, we have more lessons on algorithm refactoring, and recently launched Angular 4, so this is in beta, SQL. We're going to be launching Node.js soon, and we're constantly developing more curriculum here and adding to this. So these are the types of things that are really taking your programming to the next level and helping you out. And these are a great lessons to work through if you're in your first programming developer role and looking to really improve some of these topics like algorithm refactoring, and just really honing your skills there. So with that, I'll join you again and go back to kind of an overview of everything that we kind of discussed today. So talking about web development versus software engineer. And really the thing to focus on there is getting a solid foundation. They both kind of do the same thing of taking computers and using them effectively to solve problems and address opportunities. And so that's what we teach in our program, is how to be a really well-rounded developer that has a solid foundation, knows how to write algorithms, knows how to problem solve, find solutions to answers that you don't know. And we give you that through a really hands-on curriculum, project-based curriculum, while providing constant code review and giving you that mentorship and support that you need as you're learning. And then once you graduate, we have that extensive job preparation, and you're always kind of tuned into the Firehose network and of peers. And then having those advanced courses as well when you're ready to kind of take that to the next level and keep learning with us. So I hope this was helpful for everybody. I definitely love having you join and chatting with you about these topics. We're always happy to answer questions if you want to send them into questions@thefirehoseproject.com. And the best way to kind of chat and figure out if this is something that might be a good fit for you is to set up a one-on-one call. I'm always happy to chat further. Would love to hear your coding goals, what you're looking for out of a boot camp or education, and see if this program is a good fit for you. So I'll send out a link to the info session, as well as some time to set up a call with me, and I'd love to chat further. Otherwise, you're always welcome to email in your questions, and we'd love to hear from you. So hope everyone has a great day, and happy coding.